but I've got a lot of content here that I think you'll find useful, and it's oriented around the aspect of being able to do fundraising in a manner that allows you to be less dependent on year end. That big surge at the year end doesn't mean you won't have that, but we can try to spread that out during the year. We'll explain why. And you'll also be able to manage the episodic giving that occurs more effectively, because the hardest part about episodic giving is just simply the renewal. So I'll put this in presentation mode and show you these slides in full bloom here, and then we'll jump right into it. So our business is behavioral economics modeling. And so what we have done is developed a series, a confluence of 3 types of artificial intelligence that allow us to bring behavioral economics modeling to life. And what behavioral economics modeling is simply the psychology of pricing for an individual consumer. This is our area of specialization. And what it allows you to do is measure consumer sentiment, or in this case, the consumer is a donor, which is all we do. We only do it for the nonprofit fundraising market, and be able to calculate their sentiment toward the donor, toward the nonprofit at a specific moment in time. So that real-time modeling of sentiment allows us to ask the precise amount that is needed at a specific moment in time, not to extract an inordinate gift, but to be able to optimize the relationship between the donor sentiment and the nonprofit organization. And that can occur throughout the year, which helps to smooth cash flow. And as a result of that, we are trying to make sure we retain the donor while finding the optimal value of their giving over a lifetime of giving. So as was mentioned, Michael Goriaran is my name. My background is I have been with Arjuna for 5 years now. I was over 30 years with Microsoft and Xerox, combination of the two. And I retired when I was 55. I had the privilege of joining this organization to be able to help with its expansion. I have a personal passion for the nonprofit organization. As is mentioned at the bottom of the slide here, I was the chairman of the board for the Oregon Council for Hispanic Advancement. And so I got a really good idea of what it took to build a nonprofit from the ground up, and then to expand and diversify its financial resources. And then our background as a business, and then I'll jump right into the presentation, is we were established in 2013 as a limited liability corporation. We're now a C corporation. It was discovered or founded by a professor of decision sciences at Johns Hopkins University named Adam Treiser. And he was the one that developed the theory around the different algorithms, bringing them together to be able to create this unique capability of measuring donor sentiment. He was awarded patents for these concepts in 2013, and the technology was developed between 2013 and 2018. I had the privilege of joining the organization in 2018, and my function was to bring this out to all nonprofit organizations. We focus on gifts ranging between $5 and $10,000 annually. These are not capacity gifts. So we're not looking at things like wealth screening and things like that to determine how much to ask of a donor. That is actually absolutely irrelevant to this type of work. What we're looking at simply is measuring the consumer sentiment, or the donor sentiment in this case, and then determining at that moment how much to ask of the donor. And this can be done through all channels of solicitation for all types of fundraising campaigns. You'll see more about this later. We're very proud to have achieved this milestone in 2022, which is that we have processed more than 10 billion records, far in excess of that right now. So we know a fundamentally large amount of, we have a fundamentally large amount of insight about donor behavior across all segments of giving, from religious to higher ed to health and human services, et cetera. And we have influenced over 125 million in donations over the past 5 years. When we look at today's agenda, I'm just going to talk more in depth about understanding donor sentiment. And the first topic I'll cover is the focus on net proceeds, which we actually have been helping our clients do in a more prolific manner over the last couple of years than they were originally. And then I'll jump into optimizing donor lifetime value, personalizing individual relationships with donors about when to solicit them, finding new value in the lapsed donor file, and then how you measure fundraising performance. So I've got some polls here that I'd like to interact with you on to get a sense of where you're coming from. So I'm going to run through the first questions, and then when I'm finished doing this a couple of times, I'll have John show the results. So the audience poll is, I'd like to know if inflation is affecting your fundraising performance right now. And the options are as follows. You should be seeing the poll, but I'm not going to expose everybody to it yet, John. So let's hold on to that, John. So what is inflation? This will be your first response. And then the second one is, let me just do this. There we go. There we go. No, not yet, but we see it coming. And then the third one, it's becoming an increasing issue. And the fourth response option, it hurts. So again, is inflation affecting your fundraising performance? No. What's inflation? No, not yet, but we see it coming. Yes, it's becoming an increasing issue, or yes, it hurts. So John, if you would like to share the results, we'll start pulling those up there and see where everybody's coming from on inflation. Looks like we have no answers yet. So I don't know if anybody is answering on your end, John. Yeah. I don't see any responses or tabulation of results.
So there, like I'm starting to show up, except I can't show the results until the poll is closed. So,
okay. Well, why don't we close the poll so we can roll on?
alrighty.
There we go. Thank you, John. All right, here we go. So, and no problem. That's great. That's phenomenal that you're in very good shape. We see it coming, which is about 71% of the group, and then it's becoming an issue, 14%. This is an unusual set of circumstances, and it may be the nature of a religion and fundraising, because if I connect it to other environments like health and human services, inflation has become a material issue. So if you think about the American Lung Association, American Heart Association, American Red Cross, those types of organizations, not those specifically, but those types of organizations, what they're seeing is a little bit different trend than what you're seeing, whereas inflation has really affected their fundraising operations, and they're really focused on trying to make sure they're optimizing better the fundraising levels in their relationship to cost. So why don't we close that for now? I don't know if I can close that. Yes, I can. How do you like that? So let me jump in here. And when we think of the headlines that we are experiencing and that we talk to our clients about, it's things like, now that I was vaccinated at the end of 21 coming into 22, and I'm spending a lot on entertainment, dining, clothes, etc., am I in a situation where I have as much to give? And we're finding is we can understand where that donor is coming from and ask them the right amount to be able to make sure that during the year they're giving the optimal amount and not just simply dropping off as donors, which, as you can see from the headlines, that is taking place quite a bit. We're specifically seeing less disposable income in this particular area where gifts are totaling about $75 annually. And donations below $100 annually is about 73% of the population of individual donors in the US. So it is an important area to make sure that you are capturing these particular gifts. And when I think about the size of this particular area of giving in the US, it's about 2% of gross domestic product. And individual donors are about 400 billion, just slightly 400 billion a year in the US. And so these $100 and below gifts is a massive number of gifts, and it's important to sustain them and sustain them at the right level. Now, a lot of the clients that we are serving, we do serve, by the way, many organizations that are in the religious area. And Doug, I don't know if you want to jump in real quick with any of the ones top of your mind there.
Yeah, World Vision, Food for the Poor, Christian Appellation Project, the Washington National Cathedral, Association of the Miraculous Medal, Jewish Family Services, Trinity Missions, Stand With Us, Pray in Jesus' Name are some of the names that we work with.
So the reason I wanted to bring up those specific names is we do have a lot of religious clients, but in the health and human services side, we're seeing a lot more of this inflation impact starting to impact how much they spend on fundraising and the decisions on how they balance how often they're quote unquote going to market or soliciting the individual donors. So when I think about this one, direct mail, the cost of direct mail itself is in the 15 to 20%. I talked with a client yesterday where the increase year over year was 22% in the cost of the piece of paper plus the increases in postage. The big areas of hit right now in terms of driving this cost were envelopes, believe it or not, still is an issue. The plastic covers for the envelopes, and then the logistics and transportation aspect of actually working with the post office. So in looking at this 15 to 20%, I've had some organizations, as Doug was mentioning, in the religious side where they just simply spend more on fundraising. And I've had others on health and human services or higher ed where they're actually looking for ways of being more cost efficient. We'll talk more about that. And we're seeing more of an increase on digital versus just direct mail, as I've been alluding to. But there's a perception that this is quote unquote free because there's no cost like there is a direct mail. And I've been selling platforms for my entire career, the last 35, 40 years. And the idea that that's free is just a misnomer. It's not correct because you're paying for that infrastructure. And if you use it too often, you actually diminish brand value. and you have the propensity for or donors to unsubscribe from your solicitations. So there are consequences in having fewer donors as a result of excessively using digital solicitations. And there's also the idea that you have to pay for that. So if you're limited in how much you can use it, and you depreciate that over the cost of the number of solicitations, the cost per solicitation when judiciously used is very expensive relative to the mindset around digital platforms. So we got to balance this. We're also seeing, aside from sustaining donors and making sure you do it at the right level throughout the year, is a lot more episodic giving. And this is coming from wars like the one in Ukraine, or court battles, different laws changing in the US, natural disasters. There's a lot more demand right now for immediate assistance, especially with natural disasters. And as a result of that, it's depleting the traditional fundraising that's out there. So staying in that game, not because everything is an episodic issue, but being able to understand where your donor is given these environmental factors and soliciting them with the right amount at the right time is really the sweet spot. So when I think about this area, the things I wanted to talk about in more depth are optimizing donor lifetime first. Is knowing your customer is a prior category, knowing when to actually engage that donor. And then this is really about optimizing how much to ask and when to ask. So when I think about my next question here, I would like to know, as we start thinking about how much to ask, how you determine gift array values. Some of the formulas that we've seen include, and this is your first option on the survey, most recent contribution or highest previous contribution times a multiple of 1, 1.5, and 2. I was speaking with a client yesterday where they use a hybrid of those two, which I hadn't heard of before, but it was very logical. I just wasn't aware of it, where they look at the last gift, so the most recent contribution, and they go back 12 months and they look at the highest contribution from that point, and then they use that times 1, 1, 5, and 2. So, okay, so that's what they use for donors that are in the 1 to 13 month category of activity. The other thing we see a lot is wealth screening and the capacity to give, which is not what we do at all, as I mentioned earlier, but what is out there. And then segment of one personalization, where you know enough about that donor to know precisely how much to ask them at a specific moment in time, and then other. So if you could respond to the poll, we really appreciate it. Do you use one of these, MRC and HPC, wealth screening, segment of one personalization, or something else? And then why don't we close the poll and we'll see how we did here, John, and what we learn about our audience. Yep, there we go. So we have MRC, HPC, 40%. That's pretty normal. Wealth screening, 10%. That may be for the higher end gifts, over 1,000. Segment of one. I'm interested for the two of you to do that. I want to know what that is, because I'm not aware of anybody else doing what we're doing. So I'm curious about that one, because that's what we do. And then there's some other methodology for 30. So I would love to learn more about that as well. But thanks for participating. Helps us understand where you're coming from and knowing how much to ask and when to ask. So when we see if I click this forward, there we go. There we go. So I'm going to talk about two things real briefly here, is influencing the upside of giving. And then I'm going to talk about how to minimize the expense associated with securing donations. So what we do is we do personalization at scale, which means we know how much to ask of an individual donor at a specific moment in time. And we do this on a monthly rhythm, typically with most of our customers. You can do it less frequently than that, but most of our customers are doing direct mail monthly solicitations, and they're looking for us to tell them how much to ask at a particular moment in time. The beautiful thing about monthly solicitations, which is not required, you can do it less frequently, but monthly, it allows us the opportunity to see where donor sentiment is in pretty frequent throws. So every 30 days, we can adjust the gift array values slightly to optimize participation. Now, I will tell you, we don't get too cute with the gift array values. If someone's gift array calculation is like, say, $55 as the first priority, then we might round, or 57, I should say, we'll round that up to the next $5 for an annual gift. If it is a sustainer gift where you're looking for something monthly, and monthly giving, then we do actually take that monthly giving projection and we tell you what the dollar value is. So it could be $57 a month if that were the monthly calculation, which we would ask for. So the normal improvement in giving by knowing how much a donor will give in a particular month and then securing that gift at that point in time with our services is an improvement of 12% on average. The range of this is anywhere from 4% to 27% for the sweet spot of the work that we are doing. So the idea is that getting the gift at the right time during the idea, because you either have a traditional renewal of an annual gift, like in December, is backfilling backloading the whole year, but taking that and spreading it out during the year because you're asking regularly and the amounts are correct and the nature of the appeal is intriguing, then that gets you a smoother cash flow. So instead of your cash flow looking like expense, and then all of a sudden, boom, fundraising at the end of the year in December, you take that December dependency down, and then the cash flow comes in more regularly during the course of the year. You also want to be able to match your expenses as close as possible to the amount that is being provided at any month during the year. And that's the second part of this particular equation I'm going to show you right now. But the first part is, how do you optimize giving? So the 12% average improvement is sustained over the lifetime of the relationship with the donor. In most of our companies that we're serving, it's 3 to 5 years. So it's 3 to 5 times the initial value. Some of our clients have very long lifetimes, especially in higher education and religion, where they're somewhere between 10 and 15 years, that we're sustaining the incremental value over the entire lifetime of the donor. So this is this optimized lifetime giving. The last one is if a donor comes in, and I've been talking about $50 gifts because that's a very popular range. Below 100, we can do up to $10,000, as I mentioned, annually. But we're moving donors up the giving levels faster than existing practices. So if we start out somebody at $50, we may move them to 55 or 60 or 65 or 70 over the course of time, faster than the existing practices. We talked earlier about the common practices in the survey, most recent contribution times a multiple, or highest previous contribution times a multiple. That's what we compete against when we're delivering these results most of the time. That's 90% of the competition. The reason that's 90% of the competition is we have patents for this work, of doing this work dynamically in real time. And there isn't anybody else out there that is doing this that we're aware of. And I certainly hope there isn't, because they'd be violating our intellectual property. And so what we're looking at really is the common models of pricing, which is just simply HPC or MRC times a multiple. And these are the advantages we provide to our clients. And then the other advantage, so the denominator part of the equation, is that because we're measuring donor sentiment monthly, we can also determine whether or not that individual should receive a solicitation in a particular month. And that can be through any channel. It can be through electronic or direct response in mail. So as a result of that, especially in mail, this 10 to 30% cost reduction is associated with that. Is during the course of the month, we model every individual, and we determine how much to ask of that individual this month. And then we do this, by the way, without PII. So we do not need the person's surname. We don't need their street address. We're doing this very ethically with AI, where we are just managing the interaction with them based on our observed behavior through their giving patterns. And we have a whole bunch of information about what information you need, but basically, generally, super simple to provide the information that is necessary, which is their giving history and the pattern of it. And the second piece would be the aspect of other interactions that you've had with the donor that you might keep track of in your customer relationship management systems or your marketing automation systems. But typically, we are fluctuating volumes of direct mail solicitations per month, anywhere from 10 to 30% below what's currently being done, while we are raising the same amount of money. So there is major giving, as you know, above 10,000 typically is major giving for most organizations. And that's where an officer is involved, the giving officer, and they're responsible for either planned or major. It's large gifts. They have an intimate relationship with their insights about the donor, their motivation, when they're going to provide a gift, how much it is. We are trying to mimic that behavior with artificial intelligence. And while not perfect, it is substantially better than the existing practices we've been discussing of using RFM for segmentation and then using MRC or HPC plus a multiple. So we're doing segment of one every single month. So we're personalizing the specific ask amounts every single month for that individual donor. So we're delivering dynamic personalization at scale. So it matches your knowledge about who the donor is, in the sense of that you recognize, their previous contributions, their relationship with the nonprofit, and then we know precisely how much to ask of that donor in the solicitation. I'll show you an example of this in a minute. The problem we're solving is very straightforward. Is we are simply trying to make sure a lot of our clients use 3 ask amounts. You can use 3, 4, 5, 6. The highest I've seen is 6. 3 tends to be the best one psychologically. People respond better. to this 3 rather than responding to 4, 5, or 6. But the idea is that at the low end, if you're asking, I have one here in my office in the University of Oregon. My wife attended the University of Oregon, and the bottom amount is $300. So if we decide we want to give a gift below 300, we can certainly do that. There's an option on there that says other, but you may alienate the donor by asking so much up front. You can imagine if your neighbor has a son playing on the Little League team or a daughter playing in the Little League team, that when a friend of yours says, could you make a donation, and the first amount is 300, you may not have that much passion around the Little League, but you want to be a good neighbor and you're thinking $25 to $50, and all of a sudden the ask is 300. It's a little bit jarring, right? So what happens in that particular area is you're down here where the donor may not participate because the minimum ask is too expensive, even though there's an other, and so on and so forth. If the next amount here, like for the University of Oregon, it goes from 300 to 500. And so if I want to give a $400 gift, so I'm right in this space between 300 and 500, my tendency is to drop down to 300. So what we end up doing is we find that unique point of equilibrium for each donor at each moment in time, and we align real-time donor insight around their sentiment with their lifetime giving levels. And by doing that, we sustain them and we improve giving. The other thing I wanted to impart is this is all about the donor experience. So it's not about the situation where we're looking at, oh, did we solicit them this way and then get the donation this way? That's kind of a silly way of looking at things. What we look at is every channel of solicitation should have the gift amounts that you believe are appropriate for that particular donor. And so in the ideal state, we're surfacing the projected gift array requests and values across all your channels of solicitation, whether it's direct mail or it's online. I was on with a customer yesterday and I literally logged in. I am actually a customer of their services, and I logged in during the call. And I said, I have your solicitation, and your solicitation says this, and I log into my profile and it has a different set of numbers. And I pulled up my screen in real time and showed them that their website was not aligned with their direct mail. I said, can we please fix that? And they said, oh yeah, we can fix that. Then in direct mail, they were struggling because they weren't sure if their email system could take variable amounts each month, but many can. And we should work with our email specialist to be able to help you harmonize the donor experience across any way you are engaging them, so they have this nice consistent amount that's being asked of them. And then basically you get things that look like this. I was holding up the University of Oregon solicitation, where normally it's 300, 500, 750. It's a very wide array of ask amounts. And they're telling us what we had invested in the past. These are the things that we have made contributions to before. On behalf of my daughter and my wife went to the University of Oregon. And so we make gifts on behalf of our family to them for these particular funds. They both were in the business school there. And so all we are saying is that there's a better way of doing this by getting the gift array values more closely aligned with the individual donor, so you don't alienate them or you don't underestimate what they're willing to give. And then you also look at the secondary decision of should you mail them this stuff or not. This is a direct mail piece. You could use the same kind of thing in email or online. But the nice thing about this piece that I really like, this is from Medical Assistance Programs International, is what they do basically is this is their breathing campaign that is associated with albuterol and a nebulizer. And we give them these ask amounts right here. Ask 1, 2, 3. Our ask 1 is the anchor amount that we're trying to secure. Ask 2 and 3 are associated with elasticity measures. But what they do that's brilliant is in the breathing campaign, they say, for instance, if this was $110, we can serve 11 children, something like that. So they convert the fulfillment of their mission directly from the gift that you've provided. So they show you the direct impact that you're going to have. And so I think this is a beautiful way of doing things because it makes the impact of your gift up front very tangible. So you're giving the highest possible amount on a sustained basis. And then the other thing I would mention is that there's a learning curve associated with using artificial intelligence. I don't care whose it is, and I don't care what the purpose is. For those of you who've been exposed to Chat GPT lately, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal recently that talks about the importance of training. And what we're doing basically is we are training our algorithms for a specific singular nonprofit at a specific singular moment in time, and using that cumulative knowledge to build this model, which becomes a big asset for you, where you know specifically when to ask and how much to ask. So what we do is we take over the course of about a 9 to 12 month period, We deliver this as a service, by the way, because we found it's just much easier for our nonprofit clients to consume this as a service. But we deliver this as a service to our clients, and we don't have to deploy any technology. We don't use PII, personally identifiable information, so no last names, no addresses. So as a result of that, it goes through security and privacy screening like a hot knife through butter, no problem. We use secure file transfers to be able to provide this service back and forth every month. And then we have these 3 learning cycles that take place to get the algorithms up and running effectively during the course of the pilot period, which is about 9 to 12 months. During the baseline discovery period, we use unsupervised AI to determine the clusters around where the donors exist. And we use a combination of 2 other forms of AI to determine when to ask and how much to ask. And these are the kind of results we got at this particular client's anonymous, but this is in the health and human services area. This goes back to about 2018, 2019 timeframe. We had this client for a long time. But in the first discovery period, your results can be anywhere from 0% up to 8 or 9%. They had a better result than that. In the second round, you may get anywhere between, I think it's 4% and about 9%. So every round, you're getting better and taking what's discovered in the prior round and then incorporating those insights about donor sentiment into the rounds of applied learning. By the time you get through these 60-day periods, 3 of them, then you're in a situation where the algorithms are perfectly optimized, and then they stay homed in on what's happening with donor sentiment month by month by month. Now, you are going to have retreats in donor sentiment, and the perfect magic around this is that we are securing the gift even if it is at a lower level. And you'll see more on this. So sometimes you get lift, and sometimes you get a retention that is a better rate because you are securing a gift at a lower amount, but better than the existing methods. So you have both. In this particular case, this was the course of a year. They invested about 6,000. They made about 23,000. So they almost made 286% ROI. So almost 300% ROI, which is the equivalent of making $4 back for every dollar you invest when you're close to 300% ROI. So in this case, this is an example of 2 of our clients. We blended them together for anonymity. How do you like that? Anonymity. So anyways, what we did is we set up a control and a treatment group. And this is a pretty normal process for us, classic A/B testing, nothing unusual. And we went back and picked up their donor history for the past 3 years. The control group had a $68 gift. We had about a $69 gift. Standard deviation about 94. We had 96. So these groups are equitably distributed across the different levels of giving from 10,000 down to $100. And then what we looked at was what happens over the course of time. This was in 2022. It's a 12-month period starting about 90 days ago. So it's a prior year. And so what happened was during that time frame, these 2 organizations had a slightly lower gift amount. So you had 68 starting with the control group. They ended up with 53. The treatment group using Arjuna's services started out at 69, but ended up at 56. The standard deviation was 94 for the control group. It ended at 81. This is really the important part, is our standard deviation improved substantially from 96 to 112. And so this also occurred while not losing donors. So we found those donors that could actually provide a higher contribution. And then those donors were moved above where the control group was performing substantially. And they ended up finding another $142,000 in giving that they would not have secured otherwise if we stayed on this old pattern over here. So we shifted that distribution curve. The cost of that 142,000 was about $50,000, just to give you a sense of the ROI. Okay. And this is the most important thing about the whole thing. I mentioned it, but I want to show you this. Same customers, I should say. We recalibrated everybody to when they first started being treated. So everybody had the first start date, so to speak. And we're able to demonstrate statistical relevance in moving away from the control group by using our algorithms to signal to the donor the optimal level of giving at a particular moment in time. And then all you're doing is the delta here in giving is how much did it cost to get that? And I've been showing you you're getting back between $2 and $4 for every dollar that you invest. So you're getting a very handsome ROI. So in the calendar year, you are actually improving cash flow. So the expense that you're paying from this is being covered by the improved cash flow. And what's important is you're doing this while not losing donors. So you can see when the pilot start date, everybody is at the 0 point. We have the same pattern of giving. We're just extracting a slightly higher level of gift without using PII and with lowering the cost per dollar raised as well. That is over the lifetime of giving for the donor. And then this is another example of what we're seeing, same client situation is in their giving segment. So if I come over here, less than 25, 25 to 50, so on and so forth, this is below $1,000. They were getting very strong performance above the norm with us. You can see the gains being like 30% better. However, when they get to this $500 to $900 level, they were experiencing in their control group a giving level that was about $100 less. And with us, we secure the donors at the same rate, but we are only losing $50 on the average giving. And you can see in the donor segments from 1,000 to 2,500, over 2,500, the phenomenon is even more material, where we start to see us securing a substantially higher giving level. And this is especially poignant when you get down into this over 2,500, where we are losing $1,000 on the gift value, but the control group is losing about $3,300. So there's a nice piece of upside to be gained, even in volatile environments like we experienced in 2022, and we're going into in 23. 22 was about the combination of COVID recovery and inflation, and 23 is about recession, and we still continue to see great results. And then the next topic I wanted to cover with you is about knowing when to ask and how to determine that so you can reduce the cost per dollar raised. It's nice if you make more money, but it's even better that you're not just dependent on the lift to make that money, but you're also able to reduce your cost of fundraising operations. So in this case, this particular set of clients, a combination of two clients, it's about a 93.9% of their solicitations are producing zero, and about 69.8 are sent to individuals who did not provide a donation. So it's about a 6% response rate is what this tells you otherwise based on this, right? So it's, in that case, what you want to find out as quickly as possible, and we don't do this as generic groups. I'm just trying to show you as another view of the data. We do this individual by individual modeling. But the idea for us is how quickly can we identify people who are in this group right here, where they are not going to respond with any gift. And the reason why is a lot of our customers are fundraising with anywhere between 12 and 18 solicitations a month. We've had some higher, which is crazy, but we do see that. If you are in anywhere between, like, say, 6 and 12 or more solicitations per year, you want to be able to get this adjusted correctly based on the psychology of the donor. And that's one of the orthogonal views we have of the donor sentiment. And as soon as we identify these folks, we should probably drop from like 12 to a much smaller number. The algorithm determines the appropriate number. We have a minimum threshold in there of about quarterly, but that would be your smallest number. And then you can decide when to put somebody either into rest or lapsed or reactivation because they have become really a donor who's not participating any longer. The second type of the donor psychology that we can model for on an orthogonal view as a group is this one gift response, which is the way I make my contributions. Many of you may be the same way. End of the year, how much did I make? What are my expenses? And then what do I want to make to charitable contributions? However, for me, I don't need that many responses. So you want to be able to do, or I should say requests, is you should solicit me as few times as possible to secure the gift that I'm going to make one time a year. For me, that's usually like a reminder in October, November, and I make the gift. That's it. However, in the green, you may have somebody that's responding multiple times. Now, if they're on a sustainer basis where they're giving gifts already monthly, you can still use this insight to determine how to make that special appeal or second gift request or augmentation of their monthly gift amount. And for the green here, we're saying on an annualized basis, if they're responding with more than one gift during the year, let's keep soliciting them with the appropriate type of campaign so we're optimizing their charitable contributions. And the idea is we keep donors engaged, we sustain brand equity, but we're reducing the cost per dollar raised. I had my first official request yesterday from a customer to help them lower their carbon footprint by knowing how to rationalize their mail volume. And I said, this is right in our wheelhouse. It's a straight thing for us to be able to do. This is another orthogonal view of the same concept, is that in this case, more solicitations produced less money. This is one customer. And this customer basically, it was a dramatic thing. They have a relatively low average gift amount and they have a reasonable response rate. I think the response rate was about 8%, but the gift rate was relatively low. It's below $20. The more that they were mailing, two effects happened. They were raising less money, but they were driving their costs up inordinately at the same time. So we showed them this profile and said, can we stop mailing, 14 times a year? They had 12 plus two year-end follow-ups. And can we back it up so we're somewhere in this zone, but can we do it individual by individual judgments? And that's how you can personalize the solicitation decisions by knowing when to ask, how much to ask, and improve fundraising performance while you're preserving brand equity. This is another view of that same thing. If a lot of times we do this as a monthly service, I was mentioning for those who are in a monthly cadence or quarterly, depending on what your cadence is. But in this case, this is an exact example of a monthly where it 500,000 for 500,000 donations. That was their expense. So it's $1 for each one of these. They sent out 500,000. So they raised in a month 1.250 roughly. So their net proceeds were 750. The first month we did this calculation, it was a 30% reduction recommended in their mail. And the amount raised, the cost of that, I should say, was 350 instead of 500,000. The amount raised was 1.248. We have control and treatment running side by side. And then so they improved their net proceeds from fundraising from 750 to 898. So net, it's finding that ideal point of equilibrium and making sure that you're not spending money unnecessarily to retain donors and secure the optimal level of giving. In this case, we improved their net proceeds from fundraising by 148,000. It cost them 52,000 to do that. It's all within the calendar year. This is a month of example, for instance. So the return on investment is 181, which is $2.81 for every dollar invested. So that's the piece on cost optimization. It's not done as a group. It's done individual by individual, month by month or quarter by quarter, depending on your cadence. This is a view of the same concept of volume optimization as it's applied to the lapse reactivation. Now with lapse reactivation, so donors who have not provided a gift in 25 to 59 months, the thing we normally see is that file is mailed en masse 6 times a year. That's the norm that we see. So en masse means if they have 1 million records in that file, it's how much can I afford to spend on trying to re-engage these donors. And if it's $1, per direct mail piece, then that would be $1 million to engage 1 million donors in that category. Most people don't have that money, so they pick a lower number like $100,000 to invest, something like that. And then they have to use a model to determine whom to mail. The model we see most frequently used is recency, which means when I get to month 25, then 26, then 27, I spend my $100,000 against those who are most recent donors. The challenge with that particular approach is your return for doing that looks like this. You have a reasonably high response rate, but a low lifetime and a low retention level as a result, and a small average gift amount. And so the other one we see, and some people use both of these in different alternating months, is propensity. The example I always give with propensity is a museum. If I'm taking my family to the museum 6, 8, 10 times a year, I'm getting a lot out of that. My utility is high. So if you can find me, so you can see there's a lower number of donors here than the prior one, then we're in a situation where I'm going to give you an inordinately high gift. The challenge is the small number of donors associated with this. So then over here, the pattern looks like this, where they have fewer respondents of better gift value and better lifetime. We have the secondary service, exact ask is lift, exact donor is the cost optimization service. And we've been able to find an orthogonal slice with a different type of modeling that allows us to get a return that looks like this in lapse reactivation. We're picking the better people and we're getting a higher level of giving. And as a result of that, we're improving and outperforming these other two models substantially with a level of giving and retention that is 25% higher than where we are with these other models. So net, as you think about when to ask and how to optimize cost and how to balance out your equation between cost and fundraising during the year, these two capabilities optimize lift and expense. Last thing I want to talk about is measuring performance. And we see a lot of interesting practices in nonprofit about how they measure performance. And one that is archaic and ineffective is if I mailed out in direct mail, did I get a check back in direct mail? We all know that that's a silly concept, but it does exist out there. So we consider that a partial impact reporting. We don't report like this. We don't do channel attribution, and we don't do any type of campaign attribution. We simply look at how is the donor behaving in their relationship to the nonprofit, and is that donor giving more money regardless of how they give the money, whether it's a credit card by phone, or it's on a website, or it's a check, et cetera, et cetera. By doing this full impact reporting, you can see the delta that starts to really improve fundamentally the fundraising for the organization. And this smooths out cash flow during the year, so it's not all backed up against a year-end gift. And it allows you to do a better job with episodic giving by knowing how much to ask in a renewal campaign, regardless of which campaign they respond to or which channel that they work on, they contribute through. So the last concept I would leave you with is zero-based budgeting. I mentioned I was with Microsoft and Xerox. We did this at Microsoft extensively. I really like this. I'm a huge advocate of this. I was managing a $7.5 billion business in the US. And that particular business, every year, I would scratch everything off. Every single person and every single campaign, every single function had to be re-justified with a commitment around return on investment. And I think if you're not looking at this regularly, we did it annually at Microsoft with a 6-month update. And that particular cadence worked well for our business. But if you're not looking at this actively all the time, you may be missing out on opportunities to really take advantage of things that are working better for you in fundraising. You don't want to have a herky-jerky fundraising operation by doing this. And that's why we try to manage it annually with a mid-year update. And a mid-year update was a big deal at Microsoft. And I would just mention that if you're doing it like this, where every single project is justified and return on investment becomes their performance review. So if somebody is doing this and they work for you, that they are responsible for both the cost management and the financial goals achieved. And we can project what those are with this capability, that this particular business case is funded and survives because there is a person accountable and there is a performance metric on their performance review. But this zero-based budgeting technique, if we had more time, I'd be asking you Q&A on this one. So anyway, just in summary, we focus on net proceeds with our clients, improving giving while reducing the cost, smoothing out that cash flow during the year, making sure we know how much to ask with episodic giving. That's the core of our business. It's lifetime improvement. It's the personal relationship one-to-one per month or per quarter on whether or not to ask an individual for a gift. It is knowing when and whom to reactivate out of the lapsed file, and then doing a really good job of being financially accountable to our clients in providing financial performance and also giving a handsome return on investment to ensure that they are successful with fundraising. So I really appreciate you allowing us to present this to you. You've been very gracious with your time. I'm happy to take any questions for the last 10 minutes, Doug, that have surfaced. Yeah. You can certainly put questions in the chat, please, as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I encourage you to put questions in the chat. Michael, while that's people are typing more questions in the chat, let me kind of queue up with a couple things here. One question is, what type of campaigns does this work for? You know, there's acquisition, renewal, lapse. Where does this technology work well and where does it not?
So you can use this in any type of campaign. Normally, we have a roadmap we follow, which is start with the renewal. That allows us to get a perfect profile of the optimal donor and the nature of their behavior in the different types of donors that you have. And then we use that one by one to then go from the renewal to lapsed. And the renewal usually is up to 10,000 in giving. So we cover every one of those segments. We have different algorithms below 500, below 1,000, below 10,000 that are the exact ask core that have been honed over the course of time to be able to make sure we can optimize renewal. And then we look at the lapse file. For giving below $100, we would strongly encourage you to use the direct mail optimization capability of exact donor that I was highlighting. And that allows you that secondary feature of not just being dependent on Lyft, but also monitoring your expenses.
Cool. During the presentation, you talked about omni-channel and stuff. Is this predominantly for direct mail, or is this also usable for email, web, text? Where can these type of technologies be used?
So we find direct mail to be the strongest correlation between how much is asked and how much is returned. It's uncanny. You would think it doesn't work. It does work. It's very beautiful where you can kind of really orchestrate that. But a lot of our clients have secured and started approaching on an email only basis and audience. And we can work well in that environment as well. It's no problem whatsoever. So it doesn't matter if it's surfaced on a website, like I made the illustration earlier, where I logged into the website during the customer presentation and showed them that my gift array values were materially different between the website and the direct mail. So I would encourage everybody to use it across every channel of solicitation.
Before I ask this question, I want to remind everyone again, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. So here's a question here is, what do you perceive is the most promising change for the future for small nonprofits?
Really interesting. You know, I think it's the confluence of leveraging AI, but it's not just this type of AI. This is very simple because it's a little simple service we can deliver. I read a lot and I'm pretty familiar about this generative AI, and I think it may help you improve some practices, but I would suggest that it may allow you to develop some standards that then you can augment to enhance so they're really personalized and effective for you, that might allow you greater automation, but also personalization. And I think where ChatGPT and the like are going in terms of compute power, insight about your organization and how you correspond with customers, that will become a very strategic asset for you to improve your operational costs. What's interesting about whether it's this AI that we have that's proprietary to us or something like ChatGPT, all of these things have to be trained in your environment. So none of this is let it just run free and do what it wants. We manage ours as a service and deliver it. If you're using something like ChatGPT, which has a lot of advantage, you also need to watch what it is doing and train it so that it becomes more astute in your tone and tenor and priorities around communicating.
Michael, around the theme of small nonprofits, one question is there a minimum volume? It's like, do you have to be a certain size in order to use AI or technologies like this one?
So I would say that there's two aspects of this response. One is materiality. If your volume is too low, then it may not be worth the trouble to do it for you. The second thing is I think about Swarthmore College, which I love their case study. It's on our website. You're welcome to take a look at it. And this was a very small environment. They have a small number of donors. What the gentleman there, Fritz Ward, was doing is he was personally calculating the ask array amounts himself over a 40-hour period each summer. And they left those in flight all year long, so they were static. So for us, we came to him and alleviated the pressure for him to have to calculate those himself. And we also dynamically updated those during the year, and we gave better fundraising. Same thing, Albany Law School, they had an improvement that was substantial improvement, using us our best yet. But we alleviated the work from their staff to calculate those values. So what we would like to see in the ideal state is something around 10,000 solicitations a month, because we want to be able to split out a control group and a treatment group to be able to see what's going on with regard to response rates and managing how a donor is responding in the control versus the treatment with Arjuna. That would be an ideal state. Ideally, gift values above $50. Ideally, response rate above 5%. If I were to further comment on expanding how to think about using AI. I talked about materiality. The response rate and the gift size are surrogates for elasticity. We can't teach the algorithm things without a reasonable response rate. If you're in an inelastic level of giving, like below $50, it's harder to get the improvement. So you have to look at cost optimization in there. But these are consultative things where we do one-on-one with the clients. I'm giving you some general heuristics.
Michael, coming close to the end of our time here, while you kind of get your final thoughts together, a couple last things here. How does someone start using this? Do you have to have big, complicated systems? Do you have to change people or staff, or what's involved in actually using something like this? Because a lot of the small nonprofits don't have a lot of in-house resources.
So on this one, we do the work for you. And as a result of that, there is no technology to deploy. And the security and privacy are easy to manage because we're not looking at PII. So we're just getting numbers back and forth. And we don't need to train anybody on your staff. So it takes us about 2 weeks to get up and running, just because we're usually looking at your data, organizing it the way we want to use it, and then being able to deliver the service to you. And then usually in our most of our clients actually do it this way. We're just exchanging a CSV file monthly for those who are doing monthly solicitations. We're exchanging a spreadsheet. And basically it says donor ABC 123, ask these 3 amounts. We're appending, your natural fundraising spreadsheet solicitation schedule. We can put that back in your servers, or we can put that through secure file transfer to your printer if it's direct mail, or into your email system if it's the email system. It's as simple as that. The benefit is you have the data scientists that we employ that are delivering this work for you. So you have the best of best in terms of knowing how to apply these capabilities to your specific fundraising objectives.
Very cool. Any final thoughts, Michael or Lori?
No, the other thing I would say before Lori, because Lori, you're the host, so you can conclude the call, is just that these things are better done in one-on-one consultation. If you have a sincere interest in diving into this further, I do have a team of experts that can meet with you for a half hour, run through this a little more depth, and we can give you some tools you can use yourself to determine whether or not you would put it in different campaigns or put it in different channels, and you can see what the economic projections would be for that. So I'll turn it back to Lori. Lori, you've been very gracious to allow us to have this opportunity today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Doug, do you see there's one other question in the?
I do. Yeah, the question is, how does Arjuna determine the price?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I appreciate it.
How much does it cost?
Yeah. I showed you some net, like it was this, forget that. Yeah, it's 10 cents for each gift array calculation per month. So most of our clients are on a monthly solicitation. I don't care if they solicit more than once, it's just 10 cents. We tend to return 20 cents to 30 cents or more per 10-cent investment in the calendar year that you're making that investment. If you are on a quarterly cadence, then it's 10 cents for that particular time that you're doing it per solicitation. The reason why it's per solicitation is these are personalized. And like I said, every 10 cents gets you back 20 to 30 cents or more in fundraising.
Yeah. And following on to that, we went through a lot of dense material today. Within the next week, I will email out a link to the PDF of the presentation. You've got Michael's contact information here on the screen. So if you'd like to get more of a briefing or share this with colleagues, please let us know. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Michael. Great information. A lot of head spinning probably going on, but that's a good thing. That's a great thing. So thank you for joining, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
Take care, everybody. Good luck with your
Great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.